It is really vulnerable to record drawing and illustration, but I had an idea for this concept, and because this channel is about documenting my creative life, here we are. I'm Amanda Bennett, and welcome to the Dabbler's Journey. While it's the middle of winter, this is a highly unusual sight for us here in southern Louisiana. Overnight, we had a snowstorm blow through and awoke to a winter wonderland. I've never seen such enormous snowflakes. Because I'm deep into the hermit energy, I only managed to get a few shots from my patio and garage. I was not interested in braving the elements for the sake of filming. We did manage to have our first fire here in this house, and it was deliciously cozy. I was almost sad to leave its warmth to come work on this illustration. Now that I'm editing and all the snow is melted, I do wish I had at least romped around the yard for a few minutes. My inner child is really pouting watching this footage back. There's a lot of growing happening in real time here. I'm still trying to figure out the lighting and the camera angles. I have to remind myself that these first videos are not supposed to be perfect. I just want to get better with each one I produce. Now that we've set the mood, it's time to get started on the illustration. This is the Talons Art Creations sketchbook, and I like it for a couple of reasons. One, I like that it's like a slightly creamy paper, and so when I do a white gel pen over top, it gives it a nice subtle contrast, and it takes alcohol markers really well. I just have to be careful to put something behind it, behind the page, so that it doesn't bleed through onto the next page. Here's me unintentionally matching my nail polish to my washi tape. I am a sucker for beautiful stationery things, but I also try to be really mindful of overconsumption. So I do indulge in some of the fancier desktop accessories at times, but I do try to use them because there's no sense in having them languish in my desk. Here I'm using the Prismacolor Colorase pencil, and I realize it's really, really light and very hard to see here as I'm doing this initial sketching, but as I go along, I do darken the lines a little bit, and then of course you'll be able to see a lot better once I start inking. So I started by doing a really light grid so that I could make sure the illustration was falling in the areas within the composition that I was going for. For the longest time, I bought into the idea that I just had to miraculously start sketching and come up with, by complete accident, without any planning, a beautiful composition. And I now know that to not be true. I am allowing myself the tools that are available to me, one of them being drawing a simple grid so that I make sure my composition lands where I want it to on the page. It also helps with proportion, which, funnily enough, is something that I don't feel like I nailed on this particular drawing. I do make a few adjustments here and there, but I wish I had stepped away from the drawing before I started inking, because I really would have made some additional adjustments on the handle of these scissors here. Even with this adjustment, I still think that the proportion is off on the handle, but that's okay. This illustration was inspired by some journaling I did last week to process my response to the Neil Gaiman exposé that was published by Vulture. I'm not going to go deeply into that here, but I did turn that journaling exercise into a personal essay that I posted on my Substack. I'll include that link in the description. It'll be there if you'd like to read it. But the gist is, Neil Gaiman was a major influence on my creative life, and news of his misconduct and abuse left me feeling really disillusioned and angry. And that's where this illustration comes in. As I was drafting that essay, the image of physically cutting a ribbon that tied me to him and his work came to mind. So instead of cutting a literal thread or ribbon, string, whatever, I'm illustrating the idea of cutting ties with someone whose work no longer serves me, and it felt important and necessary. I am not a prolific or confident illustrator, but I would like to be. So I figured, since very few people see my videos or read my Substack, shout out to the 10 or so people who have subscribed on both platforms, it's low risk to be incredibly vulnerable with my art and with my words. I want to get more comfortable doing this, especially since I'm committing to documenting my creative journey. So with that in mind, I'm gonna let you enjoy this illustration, and I will pop back in at the end. Something that I noticed while doing this illustration, it helped create the distance I was seeking. Coming back to edit and to do this voiceover, I do feel more distance from that acute pain and disillusionment. And it's wild to observe healing as it's happening. Writing the essay for Substack and then doing this illustration, I really am surprised by how much of an emotional impact these creative practices have had on those really tough emotions. So I guess what I'm saying is that I can confidently say there is a tremendous amount of impact that making art can have on the emotional self. And I don't think I've ever quite paid this much attention to it. I had lots of different angles I wanted to cut between as I filmed this, but as I got going with the illustration, I forgot that was part of my plan. By the time I got to the coloring in the background, I realized I hadn't changed the angle since I sketched the grid for my guidelines. This is part of the learning process. I'm noticing that once I get going on the art, I forget about the filming. Someday I hope to get better at this, but for now, I'm just glad I have a finished illustration. As I was reviewing the final illustration, I realized I had a couple of spots that could really use some more gold dots. I noticed with this fine liner that because I didn't prime it on my scratch sheet, I had a hard time getting the ink to start flowing, so I had to go over it again. Thanks for watching, and subscribe to follow along on my misadventures living a creative life. For insights on embracing imperfection on your art journey, check out this video.